Hi everybody, it's Sunshine River, and today I'm going to be doing a book talk on winter. So it's actually day this time. It's about 4:50 in the afternoon. So, and first I wanted to tell you that this is the hardcover version. I don't know if that matters, if that affects the page number, but I just wanted to tell you that. It says Fuel and Friends or something there. And then the other books, Cinder, Scarlet, and Crass. This actually isn't the Cinder I used for the book talk, as I talked about probably in the book talk. It was a borrowed book that I read, actually. This is just my copy, so I have a copy of it because I might like to look back through it. Anyway, and so these are paperbacks, and they say square fish over here. That's the case for Cinder, Scarlet, and Crass, so I don't know if that affects the pages either. I just wanted to let you know, and I'll do that in the future. I'll always tell you what type of book it is. I'm sorry I didn't do that before. I realized it might affect the page number because I do mention page numbers a lot. So anyway, spoiler alert, I realized that I didn't say this in my original clip, so I'm having to add this in, but there will be spoilers for Winter by Marissa Meyer in this book talk, so you've been warned. And there's also a tiny bit about the Hunger Games series, but not really spoilers, just kind of about the general plot, so yep. Going into Winter, I was very excited to see how the Lunar Chronicles quartet would end, and there was substantially less mystery in it than Cinder and Scarlet, and I think a little bit less than in Crass as well. But I kind of expected that because it's the last book in the quartet, so it has to wrap things up rather than introducing a lot of new mysteries. And Winter was full of action, and I was always excited to keep reading and find out what would happen next. And initially I was concerned that I wouldn't finish Winter before the start of the school year, and I knew that once school started I wouldn't have very much time to read. But I also didn't want to have to pace myself to read it before school because I thought that would just stress me out. So then as I read Winter, it became clear that I didn't have to worry about pacing because I just loved it so much that I wanted to read all day and see what happened. And I liked learning about what life was like on Luna and getting to know many characters from the many perspectives. And I thought there was the right amount of romance and humor. And so, like with the other books in the series, Winter is very loosely based on the fairy tale it corresponds with, so it's very fresh and new. So while there wasn't a ton to make predictions about in Winter, there was one thing that I repeatedly wondered about, and that is Levana's backstory. So I'm sure if I'd read Fairest prior to Winter, I would have already known what happened with Levana and Everett and Channery. But since I haven't yet read Fairest, I ended up speculating a bit about it. So on Winter page 68, Levana was saying how she loved Everett, and that got me wondering if she truly did. And then on page 69, I began thinking perhaps Levana did love Everett, because she said she said she loved Everett, and Jason would have believed her if he had believed she was capable of such a thing. And then plus on Scarlet page 438, it was revealed that Levana does still wear the wedding band from her marriage to Everett. And on Winter page 401, Levana is thinking, she herself is thinking about how Everett is her only love. So at that point, I thought that if Levana herself is thinking she really loves Everett, she probably does. So then on Winter page 404, I went a little deeper in my speculation. So I was thinking that perhaps Levana brainwashed Everett into protecting her from the assassin that tried to murder her. And the story, which is explained on Winter page 69, it goes that a thaumaturge tried to assassinate Levana and Everett died protecting her. But Levana's so cruel, I wasn't sure how Everett could love her. And so I was guessing that maybe he didn't. And so on pages 68 to 69, Jason thought about how Everett stayed a guard after marrying Levana and how Everett often said he had no desire to sit on the throne beside her, and even less to sit around drinking wine and getting fat among the pompous families of Artemisia. So at that point, I was thinking that perhaps Everett didn't love Levana, and she brainwashed him to marrying her and protecting her. So it's just a guess, but it's what my speculation was. And then on Winter, page 534, there's another clue that Everett didn't love Levana, but she loved him. And Levana says to Winter, from the day you were born, you had everything I wanted, your beauty, your father's love. And that shows that Levana wanted Everett's love, but she didn't have it. So at that point, I was sticking with my theory I wrote about earlier, that perhaps Levana brainwashed Everett into marrying her and protecting her, but he never truly loved her. So as of right now, having finished Winter but not yet started Fairest, I'm sticking with those guesses. And the other aspect of Levana's backstory that I wondered about was what happened between her and Channery. And I was wondering how Levana got the burn marks. So I didn't expect it would be revealed in Fairest, but it turned out that Levana actually explained it on Winter pages 743 to 744. Levana explained how Channery liked to torture her and made her put her hand in the fireplace and catch fire. One thing I'm still wondering about is what or who killed Channery, because on Winter page 745, Levana says she didn't kill Channery, so I bet I'll find out how Channery died in Fairest. The other mystery I wondered about in Winter was what Garen could have been doing to Aiko. Those mysterious little things, I just love figuring those out and stuff. But I didn't really have any predictions. So on page 551, Aiko was saying how Garen was nice to her and gave her updates, and Cinder realized they stopped making updates for Serve 9.2s, which is Aiko's model, a long time ago. So I was intrigued about that. And then on page 791, Cinder revealed that Garen had the backup bioelectricity security block. So that answered what he was doing when he was updating Aiko. And additionally, there was one more thing I wondered about, but I came to the conclusion that it was probably simply an error. So on Winter, page 375, when Kinney lies about what happened at the Kessley house, Cinder's lie detector should have gone off, but it didn't, and Cinder instead was heartbroken when Kinney said he destroyed Aiko. So at first I was thinking the detector didn't go off either because Kinney was so practiced at lying that he was able to slip through the lie detector, or that it was a mistake in the book. So I decided the latter seemed more plausible because Cinder's lie detector never really seems to fail. In fact, it even saw through Jason's lie on Crest page 226, and Cinder specifically wanted to test whether she'd be able to see through it or not because Jason's so good at hiding his emotions. So it's possible that Kinney is a super good liar and fooled Cinder's lie detector, but I suspect it was simply a mistake Marissa Meyer made that wasn't caught during editing. So now we're on to characters. So Winter is extremely kind, and she's also selfless, a bit naive, and seems to be pretty unfazed by insults made at her. Winter can be clever, as seen on page 389 with her not really a plan to try to get the wolf soldiers to fight against Levana. And while Winter's decision to not use her glamour because she believes manipulating people was wrong, displays her selflessness and integrity, but I only partially agree with it. So on Winter pages 258 to 260, Scarlet suggests that Winter use her glamour to disguise them so they can get out of the spaceship port, and Winter replies that she can't. And then furthermore, when Scarlet says Winter means she won't, not can't, but won't use her glamour, Winter agrees, meaning she voluntarily didn't use her glamour. Then a worker notices them and recognizes Winter. So although the worker ends up leading Scarlet and Winter to the bay they need to get to, it's still risky for him to have seen them. Because if Levana found out he helped them and interrogated him, he could have given away where Winter and Scarlet went, like what bay they left from, and Levana could perhaps have found out what ship they were in and where they were going. So my point is Winter's refusal to use her glamour jeopardized not only her but Scarlet's safety as well. And in fact, Jason's too, because if someone sees Winter and tells Levana, then Levana will know that Jason didn't kill Winter like he was supposed to. So, while I certainly admire Winter's selflessness and integrity in not using her glamour, I feel she should have used her glamour in that situation. And Cinder uses her glamour when it's necessary, when it protects her friends. So I know Winter doesn't use her glamour because she wants to not deceive and manipulate others, but there are times to lie. So on pages 267 to 269, Scarlet is talking to Winter about using her glamour and asking why Winter can't just use it for good uses. So I agree with Scarlet here. Winter could use her glamour for good use. And Winter says you might think you're doing something good, but it turns out you're doing something bad. But the thing is, I believe that could apply to anything, not just glamour. And you could think you're doing something good, but actually be doing something bad. So I get that glamour is really powerful, but one could also do something without glamour with good intentions, and it turns out to be a horrible mistake. So I feel that Winter could use her glamour for harmless things in order to keep herself sane, though I respect her decision not to, because it's her personal decision and only hurts her. But I believe Winter should use her glamour when it's necessary and could hurt others not to use it. Like when Winter and Scarlet were trying to stay disguised, and Winter's decision not to use her glamour put not only her, but Scarlet and Jason in danger too. And if she just used glamour, it would have not hurt others, but rather helped Scarlet, Jason, and her. So I actually kind of like disagreeing with Winter on something, because it's usually Scarlet that I disagree with, and I sometimes find her kind of rude. So on Winter pages 370 to 371, this is another instance where I think Winter should have used her glamour to disguise herself, because Jericho saw her and Kenny saw her, and it would have kept her from being recognized, which would have protected both her and protected Jason, because Jericho said he planned to kill Winter on the spot and reveal that Jason was a traitor. So while it turns out that Kenny actually ended up helping them, and on Winter page 372, Kenny killed Jericho, and on page 375, Kenny filed a report that didn't mention seeing Winter. Winter didn't know it would turn out okay, so she put herself and Jason in danger by not using her glamour. Then on Winter pages 730 to 731, Winter finally uses her gift. So I think her use of her gift to manipulate Scarlet was justified, because if Winter hadn't, Amory would have taken control of Scarlet and probably killed her and Wolf and then Jason. And I don't see why Winter hates herself so much for using her gift. Like, I could see her feeling guilty, but in Winter's words, she was wretched and cruel. So I think that what she did was justified and necessary. I'm pretty sure most people agree. Like, most people would think that is justified. So, as I said earlier, I'm kind of happy that I disagree with Winter on her use of her glamour. Because when I was first getting to know Winter, she just seemed too perfect. She's kind, selfless, and everyone loves her. And Cinder was my favorite character going into Winter. And then I sort of thought, why is Cinder better than Winter? Like, Winter never uses her glamour, so she has selflessness and integrity, and Winter's kind. So basically I was kind of like second guessing myself about why did I like Cinder more than Winter. But I kind of didn't like that Winter was so perfect. So I'm glad to see she's not perfect, if that makes sense. And though while I do like disagreeing with Winter, of course, I'm glad that she made the right decision and used her gift to manipulate Scarlet and kill Amory, because she was saving her friends, and that's the kind of thing Cinder would have done. So the one other little thing I disagree with Winter about is the importance of physical appearances, and Winter seems to think physical appearances matter a good deal. On pages 150 to 152, Winter's thinking about Jason liking her appearance and wants him to see her dressed up, she thinks, but since Jason confessed that he was not immune to her appearance, she had been looking forward to this chance to dress up in new finery. And then Winter goes fishing for compliments, asking Jason if she looks pretty enough, even though Jason, knowing he and Winter can't have a relationship, doesn't like it. He tells Winter to look for compliments elsewhere, and to stop, meaning to stop the flirtatious behavior. So Winter's actions just prickle me a little, because beauty on the outside doesn't matter like personality does, and I don't like how she was using her appearance to attract Jason. And then later, on page 627, Winter feels bad that she's not sort of pretty. And again, Winter's acting like she thinks her physical appearance is important. And, I mean, Jason doesn't love her just because of her physical appearance, so, yeah. So I didn't like Jason very much in Crest, but he did grow on me as I read Winter and learned more about him. I still think Jason's rude and cold, but he clearly cares about Winter very much, and he is selfless, such as on Winter pages 244 to 248 when he helped Winter escape instead of killing her like Levana wanted him to, and it cost him his safety. As I said earlier, Cinder was my favorite character going into Winter, and she's still my favorite character now that I've finished it. So I found Cinder selfless, sarcastic, fair, intelligent, forgiving. She often feels guilty, and she has a lot of integrity. So forgive me that this is going to be long talking about Cinder, but here we go. So Cinder's selflessness and integrity were the main things I admired about her prior to reading Winter, but they're still present in Winter. Cinder continues to be selfless by trying to become the Lunar Queen even though it's not what she wants. And I did talk about that in my Scarlet Book Talk, but I want to say it's continued throughout the series. So another instance Cinder is selfless is on Winter pages 355 to 356 when she risks her safety to go try to stop Amory and the guards from hurting the civilians. So at first when I read the scene, I didn't believe Cinder was making a good choice giving herself away. On Winter page 351, Thorn tells Cinder she's the heart of this revolution, which I at first completely agreed with, but then Cinder made the case that she's not the driving force of the revolution and that the people want to revolt because they hate Levana, not just because they want to back Cinder. On Winter, page 355, Cinder tells her friends, "It's the people's revolution now, not mine." And on page 357, she says to Amory, "What you don't seem to realize is that this isn't about me. It's about the people who have lived in oppression for far too long. Levana's rule is coming to an end." And on page 360, Cinder thinks she believed what she'd said before. Levana could kill her, but Cinder had to believe her death wouldn't be the end. This revolution no longer belonged to her. So all that got me thinking, and I realized that Cinder has a valid point that the people weren't just rebelling because of her, but because they'd been oppressed by Levana. And then I remembered the Lunar Woman had actually said something earlier that supported the fact that the people were not just driven by support for Cinder, but by hate for Levana. On Winter, page 320, the woman who was trying to kill the guard in Sector RM9 said, "I don't know if that girl was Princess Celine or not, but I do know she's right. This might be our only chance to stand together, and I, for one, refuse to be afraid of you," meaning the guard, anymore. So what the woman said shows she didn't care if Celine had returned or not, but rather simply wanted to seize the opportunity to revolt against Levana. So I think perhaps Cinder thought of what that woman had said and or had heard other people say similar things, and that influenced her decision to give herself up and risk her life. So in mulling that all over, I realized Cinder's sacrificing her safety was not reckless. She knew what she was doing and believed the people didn't need her for the revolution, so if she died, Levana could still be overthrown. So I admire Cinder's selflessness in sacrificing herself. And later on throughout Winter, there are several more things that back up Cinder's decision to sacrifice herself. While they couldn't have influenced her decision as they happened afterward, they still back up the decision. On page 456, Amory says he can't guarantee that telling the people of Cinder's death will stop the rioting. On page 554, Thorn talks about how the people will fight for Cinder whether she's a revolutionary or a martyr. On page 669, Cinder's annoyed that the soldiers are all protecting her because she thinks she's not worth protecting. And that means she must still think she isn't the driving force behind the revolution. So there is one thought Cinder had that did contradict her belief that she's no longer necessary to the revolution. That's on page 462 when Cinder is trying to get out of the lake below the palace and thinks how everyone needs her. And earlier on in Winter, I just talked about this, she made it quite clear that she believed the revolution would happen without her. So at first I was confused, but then I realized that perhaps Cinder was telling herself everyone needed her as a survival strategy to give herself the will to push on because she needed to get out of the lake. And maybe she was trying to boost her fight in hopes that it would help her make it to shore. So since I believe Cinder's decision to sacrifice herself was thought through and selfless, I believe that when on page 355 she controlled her friends to get them to back away from her so she could sacrifice herself was justified, and it helped her protect the people. So one thing I disagreed about with Cinder's decision to try to protect the people is that she brought Wolf. That's the one thing I disagreed with. because his safety was jeopardized too, and after he was caught, he was fully transformed into a wolf soldier, as revealed on page 546. So I think the reason Cinder brought Wolf is that she thought she would have a better chance of survival with him, that they could both kind of help each other survive and get away from Amory and stuff. But in my opinion, Cinder's escape chance was pretty low anyway, so I think she shouldn't have brought Wolf. I mean, because she wanted to stop the violence clearly and help the people. But kind of turning herself into the thaumaturges would also stop the killing of people, and so I do think that trying to fight the thaumaturges was a good idea, because she might as well try if she's going to go out there. However, in my opinion, it would have made more sense if only Cinder went, because then if she was taken hostage, which there was a good chance of, Wolf wouldn't have been taken too. So I think that Wolf knew what he was getting into. While on page 355, Wolf does growl at the idea of Cinder and he going down to fight the thaumaturges, I don't think he was upset about going to protect Cinder. I think he just didn't like the idea of Cinder risking her safety, because he thought Cinder was the driving force of the revolution. When on page 355, Cinder was telling Wolf she had to go, he said, "He'll," meaning Amory will, "kill you." And that shows that Wolf's concerned about Cinder dying, not himself, which that is selfless of him. And if he himself had objected to going, he would have told Cinder. So I believe the decision for Wolf to come along was both Cinder's and Wolf's. And it's not either of their faults that Wolf was turned into a wolf mutation. I think that's Levana's fault. But I guess Wolf and Cinder just chose to increase the chances that they'd win the fight against Amory, but in turn make it so in the event they were captured, it would be worse because both of them would be taken. So if I'd been in Cinder's place, I would have gone without Wolf, which would lower the chances of winning a fight, but make it better if the thaumaturges won, because Wolf wouldn't be captured, but I guess it's just a trade-off. So then, one thing that confused me a little at first is on pages 449 to 450, Cinder used her glamour to control the guards, and as a result, 10 guards ended up dead, revealed on Winter, page 451. So when I read that, I was a bit confused about why Cinder would sacrifice the guards like that, because it couldn't have been because she needed to survive so the revolution could happen, because she didn't believe she was necessary for the revolution anymore. And it couldn't have been because she believed the guards were all bad people, because on Winter, page 320, Cinder was telling the woman who was going to kill a guard that she shouldn't, which I will talk about that soon. But I realized that Cinder wanted the woman to avoid killing the guard, but that doesn't mean that all guards are good either. So Cinder told the woman the guards should have trials, so the ones who were truly loyal to Levana could be punished or killed, but the others wouldn't be necessarily killed. The thing is, Cinder's manipulation of the guards to help her escape from Levana, that wasn't unnecessary, because it was to help Cinder escape, and while she may not be the sole driving force of the revolution, her life is still important. So naturally, she would want to stay alive, and I'm sure her friends would want her to stay alive as well. So, I mean, she shouldn't bank on the guards being good and throw down her life because she refuses to manipulate them. And she was willing to give up her life in hopes that she could stop Amory from hurting innocent people in Sector RM9, but I can totally see her. She's not willing to give up her life for guards that may even be loyal to Levana. There's a good chance that several of them are loyal to Levana, so. And furthermore, it isn't Cinder who killed them. On page 451, it says of the guards, 10 of them were dead, ripped to shreds by the soldiers, who had turned on them with surprising ferocity despite the bullet holes puncturing their chests and stomachs. So it's Levana's wolf mutants that killed the guards. And Cinder didn't know for sure how the guards would be killed, but she had to try to escape, and some of the guards likely weren't very nice people. So the killing of the guards without a trial could be avoided. I'm sure Cinder would have. So there is one thing Cinder did that I at first thought was selfish, but now I'm not sure whether it was selfish or not, and that's on Winter pages 312 to 313. Cinder decided to go out and see the video of herself proclaiming she's Princess Celine. So that did put Cinder at risk being out there in the sector while the video played, because getting spotted would put her companions and her at risk. And while Cinder's glamour protected her from recognition, she did point out that even using glamour, she'd still be vulnerable to camera footage. And also at that point, Cinder hadn't started thinking yet about how she wasn't the key to the rebellion anymore. So at that point, Cinder didn't know yet if the rebellion was going to work, and so for all she knew, she could still be necessary to it. And Cinder went out because she wanted to see the reaction of the people and thought there wasn't a high probability she'd get caught because Levana would probably be going through a lot of security footage. However, Cinder actually did end up getting caught because she was outside that evening. On Winter pages 338 to 339, a woman going through security footage spotted Cinder and showed it to Levana, and that's why Amory and the other guards went to RM9. So at first I thought Cinder was being selfish and going outside, but now I realize that Cinder couldn't have stayed in Maha's house forever, so I think she would have gone outside and showed up on security footage at some point. Now, I'm not totally sure if Cinder thought of that or not, so if she did think of it, it wasn't selfish or reckless for her to go outside to see the video because she would have had to go outside and risk being seen on security footage at some point. But if Cinder didn't think of that and simply went outside to see the video just because she wanted to, then it was a bit selfish and reckless. But it doesn't take away from all the other selfless things Cinder's done, and everybody makes mistakes. So, throughout Winter, Cinder continues to display integrity. On page 40, she resists manipulating Kai when he keeps asking her to manipulate him because he thinks it would be of use to practice on him. And when Cinder does give in and manipulates him on page 41, it's to show him he is too easy to manipulate, so he won't be of much use to practice on anyway. Cinder also uses the code word wire cutters whenever she's manipulating Kai so that he'll know. On page 40, when he was telling her to practice manipulation on him and she was resisting, he suggested that she use the code word wire cutters. So he'd always know when she's manipulating him, and when she manipulated him to show that he wouldn't be of use to practice on, she used the code word. And from then on, Cinder continues to use it. On page 145, she uses the code word, and she does it again on page 446. So on pages 144 to 146, Cinder was using her glamour to disguise the crew of the Rampion as the American Republic Secretary of Defense, an assistant, an intern, and 2 security agents. So that deception is justified because it was part of the plan to get Cinder to Luna and gain support and overthrow Levana for the good of everyone. And on page 446, when Cinder manipulated Kai to get him to calm down, that was justified too because she was manipulating him so he wouldn't do anything reckless, which could get Levana to kill him. So basically both those uses were justified, but Cinder's use of the code word so Kai would know that he was being manipulated showed Cinder's integrity. Cinder also displays integrity on page 169 when she asks for permission before manipulating Thorn and Wolf. And Cinder then feels bad about manipulating Thorn and Wolf, thinking, though she knew she was doing it for their own protection, keeping them from being turned into weapons for the enemy, she couldn't help feeling like manipulating them was a betrayal of their trust. So as Cinder notes, her use of glamour is justified. She's trying to get her friends into the maglev tunnel so they can get to RM9 and stay with Wolf's parents and broadcast Cinder's message and spark rebellion. So the fact that even though the manipulation is justified, Cinder asks permission to manipulate and felt bad for the manipulation afterwards shows her integrity. A couple other examples of Cinder's integrity are on page 310, how she thinks how many times she's been terrified she's becoming like Levana, which means like she's basically thinking how she doesn't want to become like Levana, and Levana uses her gift in unjustified ways. And on page 651, when Winter's thinking the people weren't blinded by Cinder's glamour or being manipulated into seeing her as the rightful queen, they were seeing her as she truly was. That's just showing Cinder's integrity too. There is one instance where I'm not totally sure whether I think Cinder should have used her gift or not. That's on pages 356 to 357. Amory thinks Cinder should have used her glamour to constantly control the people in RM9 so that the thaumaturges couldn't come and take them as they did. And Cinder says she didn't constantly manipulate her people because she wanted them to have freedom. And so at first I lean more towards thinking that Cinder did the right thing not manipulating the people. I mean, what she did surely shows her integrity, but I'm kind of debating whether or not I think she should have used her gift or not. So at first I was thinking I was sure that people wouldn't want Cinder to constantly control them so they'd be more protected. But I thought, what's the point of being better protected if the person protecting you is just going to control you like the person they're protecting you from would? On page 426, Cinder considered that maybe she should have controlled the people and kept them alive. At that point, I still thought that the people wouldn't have wanted that. I thought that if Cinder had manipulated them, they might reject her as their queen. They might not trust her because she controlled them. And I thought that in order to gain their trust, it was necessary to not manipulate them. Then on page 683, when Cinder reaches out with her gift to control the people so no thaumaturgist can claim them, she thinks about how she should have done that in RM9. And so, I stick with the fact that in RM9, in order to gain the people's trust, it was necessary not to manipulate them so that they knew they would be able to trust Cinder. However, I've realized now that Cinder might have made the wrong choice when she didn't control the people that day Amory came. Because by then she had gained their trust, so she could probably tell them she was manipulating them for their own safety and protection, and they would probably have understood. So like I said before, everyone makes mistakes. But I realized that Cinder probably made a mistake there. Overall, I believe Cinder uses her gift the right amount. I feel like Winter doesn't use her gift enough, which I talked about earlier. And Scarlet's the opposite. On Winter, page 268, Scarlet said that if she had the gift, she would have shown those snotty imbeciles, presumably Lunars who use the gift against Scarlet, a thing or two, see how they like being asked to do tricks. So Scarlet didn't seem all ashamed to have said that, and so I think that she would probably use her gift too much. But I think that Winter uses her gift too little, Scarlet uses her gift. If she had it, she would use it too much. Though she doesn't have the gift. And Cinder uses hers the right amount. So yes, she's made some mistakes, but she recognizes it and feels bad about it after. And her mistakes show she's not perfect, which is human. So, since I talked about it in my Crest Book Talk, I decided to quickly bring up Cinder's understanding of sacrifice. On Winter, page 686, Cinder thinks of how Wolf is her ally and wonders if risking his life in the crossfire is worth it to end the war. Then on page 687, Cinder drops her arm, indicating that her army should charge. And I realize it demonstrates Cinder's understanding of sacrifices. So Cinder's decision to charge will risk Wolf getting caught on the crossfire, and he doesn't have a choice, so it's a sacrifice he's forced to make. But this scene shows that Cinder does understand sacrifices that need to be made for the good of everyone, though I am glad Wolf doesn't end up dying. So some of Cinder's traits that really show through in Winter are her fairness, intelligence, and forgivingness. So I really like how on page 320, Cinder stopped the people from killing the guards. Cinder realized that Lavanna is the true enemy, and some of the guards were forced into being guards by Lavanna. So Cinder proposed that the guards be given a fair trial so that those who are not loyal to Lavanna will not be punished. And I think it shows Cinder's fairness and intelligence that she did not want the guards to be killed right away and instead wanted them to stand trial. So on page 501, Scarlet told the Wolf soldiers that they aren't allowed to kill civilians, not even those obnoxious aristocrats. And that reminded me of how Cinder told the people not to kill the guards. However, I think Scarlet telling the Wolf soldiers not to kill aristocrats was a little different. Scarlet was trying to make the point that she didn't want the Wolf soldiers running around killing everybody. She said, "Our goal is to dethrone Lavanna, not slaughter the whole city." And besides, Scarlet wasn't exactly speaking out about how the aristocrats should be treated fairly, as Cinder did for the guards. Scarlet called the aristocrats obnoxious, whereas Cinder talked about how some guards were forced to work for Lavanna. So, I do agree that guards were probably forced to work for Lavanna, whereas aristocrats aren't forced to be aristocrats, they just kind of like the cushiony life. But basically my point is that Scarlet wasn't displaying the fair, intelligent mindset that Cinder was. It's not a mark against Scarlet, it's just saying that that wasn't quite the example Cinder's was. On page 439, Cinder is watching Adri's trial and thinks it was impossible not to feel a tinge of pity for the woman, meaning Adri. So that's actually very forgiving of Cinder. After all Adri's done to her, then Adri begins yelling how she hates Cinder, and Cinder begins finding it easier not to care. But that's understandable. Adri's done a lot of horrible things to Cinder. And then on page 441, when Adri is sobbing and is a hysteric wreck, Cinder actually considers manipulating Adri so she could die with a bit of dignity, though Cinder ends up not doing it. And so I think the fact that Cinder even considered helping Adri shows Cinder's forgiveness, seeing how abominably Adri treated Cinder. And also, in my opinion, the use of Cinder's gift to allow Adri to die with dignity would be justified because it would be a kind deed to help someone. On page 742, when Cinder saw Levana's scars and deformed body, there was a twinge of sympathy in her stomach, but only twinge. And then on page 756, when Levana was weak and exhausted and couldn't even hold her glamour up anymore, Cinder actually felt bad. Her words are, "A shock of pity stole through her." This miserable, awful woman, meaning Levana, still had no idea what it meant to be truly beautiful or truly loved. And so I think it's extremely forgiving of Cinder to pity Levana when Levana has tried to kill her so many times and it's been so cruel. On page 786, Cinder says that she is going to have the antidote for the plague made lab-grown rather than have the ungifted lunars forced into a comatose state so their blood can be harvested, which is a violation of their rights. So the fact that Cinder doesn't want to harm ungifted lunars and violate their rights shows Cinder's fairness. On page 787, Cinder asks that the cyborg laws be re-examined in all the earthen countries. And that shows Cinder's fairness as well. Cinder talks about how cyborgs just want acceptance and shouldn't be discriminated against. And I also want to say that while Cinder is a cyborg who is mistreated, she clearly isn't asking that the laws be re-examined for her own gain. She and her friends overthrew Levana, so Cinder's respected now. She clearly just wants other cyborgs to be treated fairly. On page 791, Cinder asks that since Adri is the owner of the bioelectrical security block, patent, and technology, she be compensated for it. And that shows Cinder's fairness in that even though Adri was horrible to Cinder, Cinder wants Adri to be compensated. Then on page 792, after Cinder's asked that Adri get royalty, Cinder realized with some surprise that she didn't feel as bitter about it as she thought she would. Let Adri have her riches and royalties, her daughter and her life. After this day, Cinder intended never to think of either of them again. So, that shows Cinder's forgiveness. While she certainly dislikes Adri and Pearl, and they were terrible to her, Cinder doesn't mind if they get rich, and I'm really glad Cinder doesn't have to see Adri and Pearl again. So, on page 820, Cinder says she's decided to put an end to the lunar monarchy and turn it into a republic. So I totally agree with Cinder's decision. I think a republic is the fairest form of government where the people pick who they want to lead them. Cinder reasons that some king or queen is going to brainwash the people again, use their power to enslave them. There has to be some division of power, some checks and balances. So I've decided to change Luna into a republic, elected officials and all. So I think the decision shows Cinder's intelligence and fairness, and I'm also glad she's not going to be the lunar queen because she never wanted it. And now she can instead go back to the back to the Eastern Commonwealth and maybe be empress there, as she said, someday. And so, yeah. So, Kai is kind, very loyal to his country, playful, and reckless in expressing his distaste for Levana. Kai also has strong moral principles. One instance of that is on Winter, page 442, when Kai spoke out for Adri, even though she's a horrible person because she's innocent. Kai must know Adri and Pearl are horrible, as he saw how Pearl treated Cinder on Cinder page 297, being rude to her and dumping the boxes on her work desk, and how Adri treated Cinder on Cinder pages 339 to 340, trying to hit her. So, however, the fact that he still wanted to help Pearl and Adri shows his high moral standards. So I, like Kai, didn't want to see Adri die for a crime she was innocent of, and Pearl become a servant for the same reason. And another example of Kai's high moral standards was on Winter, page 787, when he looked ashamed that the Commonwealth had unjust cyborg laws like the rest of the planet, and then was the first to agree to Cinder's request that the cyborg laws be re-examined. And Kai then said that the laws were unfair and antiquated. So Kai was also very selfless with his plan that he talks about on Winter, pages 571 to 573, the plan to sacrifice himself so Levana would be killed. So, Cress is imaginative and timid, however she can also be selfless. An example of Cress's selflessness was on Winter, page 178, when Cress shuts the door so the others will be safe, even though it means she has to stay behind and risk her safety. Another example is on page 228, when Cress decides 228, when Cress decides to stay behind in Levana's palace so she can operate the cameras and make the blackouts and security footage look random, so Scarlet and Winter will have a better chance of escape. I think that Cress is probably the most like me out of all the characters because I am timid and imaginative too. So while I didn't admire Cress as much as some of the others, probably because I did find her to be a lot like me, and it's kind of hard to admire yourself, I did admire Cress's selflessness and bravery, and I think it really showed through in Winter. So Thorn is flirtatious, cocky, and at times inconsiderate. While he can be selfish, he can also be selfless. Thorn was selfless on Winter, pages 746 to 747, when he was trying to convince Cinder to let him go so that she could kill Levana. I also found Thorn quite amusing. One of my favorites was on page 169 when Cinder was asking for permission to use her gift to control Thorn's body, and he said, "I've been waiting for you to admit that you wanted my body." Another very amusing Thorn moment was on page 553 when he was imitating Levana and then mocking her, saying, "I am a psychotic, power-hungry nutbasket and my breath smells really bad under this veil." Sorry, that was supposed to be like quotation marks. So Wolf is selfless and protective, willing to do anything for Scarlet. Scarlet is very fiery and determined. However, in my opinion, she also came off as a little rude. I didn't like the way Scarlet sometimes acted towards Winter. So I like reading books with many different types of characters, which Marissa Meyer does very well in the Lunar Chronicles. So while I'm glad Scarlet's a part of the series, I personally am not a huge fan of her. Aiko is amusing and selfless. One thing Aiko said that I found very funny was on Winter, page 136, when Thorn was calling everybody liabilities, and Aiko said, "Am I one too?" And then said, "I don't want to be left out." I found it hilarious that Aiko wanted to be a liability, probably not knowing what it was. And I'm also amused by how on page 368, Aiko was marveling at how attractive Kinney is, and how on page 373 she was talking about how she understands sarcasm. Aiko also occasionally playfully brags, which could come off as annoying, but she doesn't overdo the bragging, so I don't mind it. Maha Kesley isn't a major character in Winter, but I wanted to say that from what I saw of her, she's very selfless and brave. On Winter, page 275, Cinder thinks about how Maha's put herself in danger by sheltering Cinder and her friends, and also Maha's going with less food in order to feed Cinder and her friends. And then on page 354, Maha says that the cyborg she knows is Celine Blackburn, the true queen of Luna. And Maha's words are likely to stir up rebellion and help overthrow Levana, so they're for the good of all, but they're also likely to put Maha at risk. Dr. Erland wasn't in Winter, but there is something I'd like to mention about him. Dr. Erland was selfless and displayed integrity and not using his glamour and suffering hallucinations because of it. He talks about this to Cinder on Cinder pages 241 to 242. The thing is, Dr. Erland only stopped using his glamour because he thought his daughter was killed, so he started hating Levana and moved to Earth. On Cinder, page 243, he tells Cinder how he didn't mind other shells being killed and that he used to agree with Levana's ways. And on Cress, page 65, he says he had always given off the illusion of being much taller when he was surrounded by the narcissistic lunar court. So I'm saying Dr. Erland is selflessness and integrity, but that it's just tainted by the fact that he didn't oppose Levana in unjust manipulation until something that affected him personally happened. And so Adrian Pearl appeared a little bit in Winter, and as I said earlier, I admire how Cinder actually isn't as cruel as she could be to them, and I too feel a little bit bad for Adrian Pearl at times. Besides the times I mentioned earlier, a time I felt bad for Adrian Pearl was on Winter, pages 304 to 305. At first I thought the wolf mutation might kill Pearl, and I had a tiny bit of hope that Pearl wouldn't be killed. I despise Pearl and Adri, of course, but I still wouldn't want them to have a painful death if it can be helped, and I'm just glad Cinder doesn't have to live with them anymore. Levana is certainly a cruel and merciless person. On Winter, pages 742 to 744, it's Levana reveals how Channery burned her, and I think that Channery is a horrible person to have done that to Levana, but Levana shouldn't go do it to someone else. And it's not Cinder's fault her mother was terrible and cruel, so while I do feel bad for Levana, for what Channery did to her. It's not an excuse for Levana to act the way she does and be horrible to so many people. So, I almost ran out of space on my camera, so I have to transfer some files real quick, but I will be back. So I'm sorry, that took longer than expected. We had to transfer a lot of clips and put them in iMovie, but we're good now. So some aspects of the Lunar Rebellion reminded me a bit of those of the rebellion against the Capitol in the Hunger Games series. On winter pages 311 to 312, when Cinder's thinking about how the sectors are disconnected and flooded with propaganda, and they'll hopefully now unite against Levana, that reminded me of the Hunger Games a bit, how the districts have to unite. And then also Cinder's message about how she's Celine, how they broadcast it and stuff, kind of reminds me how they broadcast like Mockingjay propaganda and Mockingjay. So anyway, and then on winter, page 320, when Cinder's telling the people of RM9 that the guards are not their enemies, this reminds me of how in the Hunger Games series a major theme was identifying the true enemy and uniting against it. I think I wrote a paper about that for school, maybe, I'm guessing. So Cinder's telling the people that many of the guards have been forced by Levana to work for her and that Levana's the true enemy, and in the Hunger Games series that tributes have to stop viewing each other as enemies and unite against the Capitol. And then additionally on winter, page 436, the crazy fashion of the Lunar Court reminds me of Capitol citizens in the Hunger Games series. Now I'll talk a bit about the theme about times to lie. So I know I already talked some about it when I was talking about characters, but I have some more things to say. So first of all, I wanted to say something about how I agreed with Cinder that she may not have been the sole driving force behind the revolution. So many times I've said that when Cinder uses her gift, it's justified because it's to protect her and her friends, and that if Cinder's killed, she'll not be able to overthrow Levana. So while I no longer believe that if Cinder was killed during the revolution, Levana would not have been overthrown, I do still believe those uses of glamour are justified. First of all, it's so obviously justified to protect your friends and yourself. Even if there had never been a belief that the well-being of all hinged on Cinder, I would have deemed it justified of Cinder to use glamour to protect herself because it's self-defense. However, I also believe that prior to the video of Cinder playing in the revolution blossoming, Cinder and her friends were indeed necessary to begin the revolution, and I believe Cinder knew that. She and her friends were the ones who had the plan for the revolution. They were the ones who started it. So I think it wouldn't have begun without them. Actually, later on winter page 310, Levana is thinking about how it's Cinder and her friends who started the rebellion. She thinks, and all because of that cyborg and her wretched video and her stupid speeches. So that backs up my point that the survival of Cinder and her friends was crucial up until they played the video and started the rebellion. However, once the revolution started, I believe it's less crucial that Cinder and her friends be there to spur it along. But when Cinder uses her gift to protect her friends and herself, it's just justified because it's the right and natural thing to do. So on winter pages 21 to 23, Winter fakes having a hallucination of a mutant creature in her room so that the guards will chase it and Winter can escape and see Jason. So I think Winter's deception was justified because seeing Jason didn't do anyone any harm, and it was good for Winter and Jason. On winter page 63, Jason's thinking of how the vaults, though dingy and ugly, are kind of a nice break from the beauty of Artemisia, because the beauty simply covers up all the lies and brainwashing that take place there. So this shows that something true and honest but not as pretty can be valued over something beautiful yet fake, and I kind of like that. Also on winter page 63, Jason thinks of how his body hasn't been fully his own since he became a member of Levana's guard. And I think that's really sad, and it's an unjustified use of glamour for Levana and the members of her entourage to use him like that, but Levana and her entourage are horrible, so you can't expect much out of them. On pages 126 to 128, Kyle lies to Levana about how he was treated badly by the crew of the Rampion and how he doesn't care about Cinder's claims to the throne and how he wants to marry Levana because he believes it will bring peace. So those are justified lies because they're necessary in order for the wedding to be put back on and moved to Luna so that Cinder's plan to sneak onto Luna, which she talked about on Crest pages 315 to 316, can be put into place, and that's for the good of everyone. On pages 143 to 144, the crew of the Rampion pretend the Rampion belongs to the American Republic Secretary of Defense, and Kai pretends to believe so too. So that deception is justified because it's part of the plan to transport Cinder to Luna so that she can gain support and overthrow Levana. On pages 169 to 178, Cinder uses her glamour to control Thorn, Wolf, and the guard. And these are justified uses of glamour because Cinder uses her glamour to get her friends and herself safely onto the maglev tunnels, and after that gain the support of the lunar people and overthrow Levana, which is for the good of everyone. On page 189, Winter pretends she wants the paper in the crate in order to help Cress escape, and that's justified because Winter's being kind and helping Cress. On pages 271 to 274, Jason's deceit pretending he killed Winter is of course justified because it helps Winter escape, buying her time before Levana comes to kill her, and it buys Jason time before Levana discovers he didn't kill Winter and tries to kill him and his parents. On page 313, Cinder's use of glamour was justified. She needed to disguise herself so that people wouldn't notice her, because then guards would probably take her and Levana would have her executed. On page 319, when the civilians are using their gift to stop the guards who are clubbing a man who spoke out against lunar authority, that's a justified use of glamour. The civilians are saving a man who, in my opinion, hasn't done anything significant enough to warrant a clubbing. However, when on page 320 a woman subsequently uses her gift to force a knife to the guard's throat, intending to kill him, that's an unjustified use of glamour. And Cinder stops the woman and explains that the guards deserve a trial before they're killed because many guards have been forced to be guards by Levana. And for the reason Cinder states the woman's use of manipulation to attempt to kill the guard is unjustified. On pages 332 to 334, Levana brainwashes Kai into saying what she wants him to say about how Cinder is not Selene but an imposter and the people of Luna should not trust her. Of course, this is not a justified use of Levana's gift, as it will only help her maintain her cruel regime, and it's against Kai's will to say those things. On page 355, Cinder controls Wolf's mind so thaumaturgists can't take control of it. That is justified because it makes it so Wolf won't get taken over, which could lead to both his and Cinder's capture and demise. On page 375, Kinney leaves Winter out of his report to keep her safe and hidden, and this is justified as it is to protect Winter. On page 585, Cinder suggests using her glamour to take control of the guard and the other two people. So that would be justified as it would help Aiko, Jason, and her escape and get the antidote to Winter and Scarlet quickly, which would save them and also save all the other people in that sector, the lumber sector that had gotten the plague. On pages 642 to 644, Kai deceives the guard by pretending he has to get the Brooch of Eternal Starlight. So that's a justified deception because it allows Cress to sneak past while the guard is distracted, and then Cress can hack into the palace control center and play the video of Levana. So once everyone sees what Levana truly looks like, they'll see she's been lying about her appearance and hopefully be more compelled to rebel against her, which is for the good of all. On pages 697 to 698, the Lunars manipulating the servant girl are using their gift in an unjustified manner, as it is unnecessary and against the girl's will to have her dancing for them. On Winter, page 700, Kai's lie about having enough ammunition to destroy all of Luna is justified because he did it so that Lunars would become nervous and willing to help the Earthens escape the Great Hall, and if they escape they'll be in safety, and the Lunars who come will be in safety too, so bonus for them. On page 716, Cinder's use of her gift to hold Kinney still is justified because she doesn't know whether he'll attack her and Aiko or not, and it's for their protection. On pages 716 to 718, Cinder's use of her gift to hold the other guard still is justified because if she didn't, the guard might attack Aiko and her. So she's doing it for their protection again. And on pages 754 to 756, Cinder's use of her gift to control Levana's arm is justified because if Cinder didn't, Levana would kill Cinder and all her friends. So that is it for my winter book talk, and I loved Winter so much, and it wrapped up the quartet in a very satisfying way. The main characters all ended up in a good place, which made me happy. Um, so I'm going to be reading Ferris now. I actually have it right here. I got it yesterday. And so the school year is going to start soon, so I won't have as much free time as usual. I won't have as much free time as during the summer. But, so it may take me a while to get the book talk up and stuff, but Ferris is a lot shorter than I thought it was, so we'll just have to see. So I'm interested to hear about Levana's backstory, and I'm also probably going to be reading Stars Above, which is the collection of short stories involving the characters in the Lunar Chronicles, and I've already read Glitches, which was in the back of the Cinder copy I read, and The Queen's Army, which was in the back of a Scarlet copy. So I'm not really sure if those are in Stars Above or not, but they might be. I don't know. So I'm going to be reading that. So yeah, so that was my book talk on Winter by Marissa Meyer, and hope you enjoyed, and I'm sorry it's so long. So see you next time. Sunshine River signing out.